This is a potentially unverified story that is circulating among the internet right now. It's an open letter to Apple that was posted to GitHub by someone named Avi Agarwal. I may be pronouncing that incorrectly. It says, I'm going to start with the beginning, open letter to Apple. I've interned at the Apple Special Projects Group for roughly 6 months now. Through this process, I have become increasingly disenchanted by the political environment within the company. In this open letter, I hope to air out some of these qualms and incite some level of change. This makes reference to Damore, and I think it may be a similar situation to Damore. If you're not familiar, James Damore was the Google engineer they called the Google Bro, and I really want to talk about James Damore too. So first thing I want to do is, a lot of people are saying this is unconfirmed. So what I did was I popped open LinkedIn, I found Avi Agarwal. It says he's an engineering intern at Apple, and it's got the history of his career and various things that kind of lines up. Look, for 6 months he's been an engineering intern at Apple, so it seems like this guy's probably telling the truth. I don't want to, I don't know. His LinkedIn's public. You can see it. I'm not trying to send out his information or anything like that, but we're trying to verify whether or not this is a legit post, okay? It might not be. Keep that in mind. The LinkedIn could be fake. This could be fake, but I think it's interesting nonetheless, and this will be a good segue to talk about the hypocrisy of what happened with James Damore. He says, the political landscape. Just like every other company I've worked at, I hope that at Apple I would be able to bring my whole self to work, be able to freely express my point of view on issues, and hope to be heard as respectfully as I hear others. Unfortunately, the reality was far detached from this ideal viewpoint in my head. There was a significant emphasis on undergoing hidden bias and microaggression training. I went through these trainings with an open mind, and afterwards, I wanted to express to my coworkers how I found them to be silly and mostly just classes on common sense. This was met with terrible backlash. I was told that I was extremely privileged and my opinion was completely invalid because of it. I was told that just talking about my thoughts was making others uncomfortable, which was absolutely appalling to me. I go to school at Purdue University, which is an incredibly diverse school. It has a massive international student population, and never have I experienced the level of aversion from discussion that I see at Apple. There's more here, but I also want to point something out. Do you see how he talks about how he wanted to bring his whole self to work, but he realized he couldn't? This is why I think the polls were wrong in 2016 and why they're probably wrong in the midterm. We got about 1 week until the midterm elections. Early voting is already happening. How many people do you think exist that are scared to talk about how they really feel? They're scared to bring their whole selves to work, to their friends, to their family, to people calling them on the phone or sending them text messages or knocking on their door. They probably don't want to do it. How many people want to put signs in their yard? Most probably won't because they're scared of the backlash. They're scared of being insulted and derided, losing their jobs. And this is another example. It isn't just James Damore, it's now apparently this guy Avi. More examples of people who are scared to express their point of view, even when they're not conservatives. Social liberals, people who are center-left, who have traditionally been Democrat. I know some of them. They don't want to speak up. I have friends who consider themselves to be democratic socialists who are terrified to speak up. Because in their minds, you can actually believe in more socialistic programs and not be a part of this ideology of, microaggression, regressive left mentality. That there are people who can believe in, look, it's true. You can believe in, it's possible to believe in social justice without implementing identitarian policies and being racist. You can say hey, blockbusting shouldn't be allowed. Plain and simple, right? There are people on the left who even don't want to speak up. And there are people who are moderate, who are pushed right because they can't speak up. And there are people who are undecided who will never hear the real left-wing argument because these people won't speak and they'll only hear the conservatives giving their point of view. Thus, I'll say it again, politics flows in one direction. But let's continue on. He says censorship and fear. If there's something that James Damore's memo showed us, it's that there's a massive fear amongst like-minded conservatives with voicing our opinion or even just trying to have a conversation about our viewpoint. Despite numerous times in this memo acknowledging both sides of the argument and repeatedly stating that he's not fundamentally against the idea of encouraging and increasing minorities, he was still fired. The fact is, when we make diversity a with or without us issue, it is incredibly hard to even begin to talk about it. This is not a black and white issue. Anyone who wants to talk about the opposite side of diversity should not have a target painted on their back. And he brings up diversity and affirmative action. It is no secret that Apple's intern program is one of the most competitive and well-paying amongst the industry. As such, one would expect that with such a broad talent pool, Apple interns would be absolutely the best in their class. Unfortunately, I've personally experienced this not to be the case. Apple covets its 50% underrepresented new hire rate, but this diversity doesn't come without a cost. In order to actually overcome my bias, I began noting down whether a colleague demonstrated lack of knowledge on basic CS topics, and especially when they made no effort to learn the topic. While I won't post the raw statistics here because they are actually fairly disheartening, I would summarize it as follows. There is a significant correlation between whether a person was in an underrepresented group and their lack of knowledge. While I admit there might be some causation correlation fallacy going on here, i.e. new hires might be from more underrepresented groups and new hires might be lacking in knowledge, this trend is far too alarming to ignore. One thing that people talk about, I've heard this before, any company that would put diversity above meritocracy will likely suffer. They will lose money, their stock will go down because they're not functioning to the best of their abilities, they're functioning to serve a political ideology, and businesses aren't designed to be political necessarily, they're designed to produce things, to be of value. So what ends up happening is that big companies that are making massive profits probably don't see the damage they do when they bring in people who don't have the talent. They have room, right? So a company like Apple, why would they be more concerned about the race or gender of a person rather than their talent? Because they make so much money. They're one of the most, I believe they're possibly the most profitable company on the planet. They don't care. They just don't. Because when they bring in these people, it's not a huge loss for them. They have so much power in the industry that they can bring on people who have the talent and still manage to get by. Perhaps there will be a beneficial aspect to our society then, maybe not, I don't know. The point is, you can see that there is a clear reason why this is able to happen. The companies have enough profits to where they can actually lose money and not really be worried about it. He goes on. Alternatives to affirmative action. Fundamentally, I believe that change in the distribution of people at the final level, that is, careers need to come from a grassroots level. By encouraging more minorities and women to join CS at the school level, there will be a larger selection of talent, underrepresented people to choose from. With affirmative action, we only strive to strengthen the imposter syndrome that so many women and people of color already have. They have to second guess themselves at every step, wondering if they are a diversity hire or actually earned their way through to their job. And right now, I want to bring up James Damore and something that's really important to highlight. James Damore's memo was saying that men and women are different, and because they enjoy different things or focus on different things, we need to build a work environment that is more beneficial to women. Quite literally, James Damore said that Google was a patriarchal environment and that they needed to institute policies that would be beneficial to women. He was called sexist and a misogynist because of this. He was called alt-right, all the smears in the book, when he was literally arguing from the feminist playbook. This is why I so often say, there are no rules, there are none. Because even when James Damore says, hey, maybe you're right, maybe our work environment is designed to benefit men so they strive, and we should change the system so that it can benefit women, they say, sexist, you're sexist, women can do anything. Then at the same time, these articles exist from feminist outlets saying, work environments are patriarchal and need to be changed. And I'm reading these like, you're literally arguing what James Damore said. Why are you not being called sexist? The reason, there are no rules. If they want to create hubbub, they want to point the finger, they need something to eat, to destroy, so they eat themselves. James Damore could have been a very powerful asset. You know why? James Damore was a computational biologist, right? He actually knew what he was talking about. And he made an argument that would scientifically support the idea that workplace environments are too patriarchal. But they cut him out and threw him to the wolves. They only hurt themselves, they only eat their own. So there's a couple more sections in Avi's open letter. Let's read through it. He says, disparity in distribution and its causes. The distribution of general population doesn't necessarily say anything about the qualities and interests of those people. A simple example is the overrepresentation of African Americans in basketball. Just because the general population is 13% doesn't necessarily mean that 13% of NBA players will be black. No, it's actually not true. It's overwhelmingly. In a similar light, it is important to consider this industry might be facing a similar situation. It could just be that the interests and goals of the general population align themselves to create the distributions we see in companies today. As numerous scientific studies have shown, men and women do not necessarily have the same interests. Thus, it is very strange to assume that the distribution of men and women in companies will end up exactly the same as the general population. I'd argue that there might be some level of systematic oppression going on because the numbers are way too off. But it doesn't mean that every waking moment of our careers have to involve supporting and shrinking the gap. The next section, the abundance of wealth in tech. The tech industry is incredibly profitable to the point where it's easy enough to lose sight of the fact that it is a business at the lowest level. While we can afford to splurge on diversity hiring and needless training at the moment, this will not necessarily always be the case. When the going gets tough, businesses have to do what it takes to keep afloat. And it is at that point that I truly think these decisions will come back to bite us in the back. When companies have to lay off large droves of people, and they risk being seen as discriminatory in their firings or go bankrupt because they fired their more talented staff, will they truly learn the cost of diversity? Discourse. This letter is not just meant to be put out to the world. I hope to start an honest conversation from it. If you have any questions or concerns, please open up an issue on this repo, and I would love to have a civil discussion. Well, I assure you that's not going to be the case, and I'm going to start counting down my clock to when this young man is fired from his position at Apple as an intern. Because he said a lot of things that made sense. Think about it. He made a really good point. If we're talking about nation-level statistics, why then is the NBA not only 13% black? Why are most of the players black? Well, because to us, to most average people, we just want the best people for the job. And it just so happens that, be it within their culture, or that it may be true that they tend to be taller, that black Americans tend to be tall, or black people tend to be taller. The fact remains that there is more interest and talent among black people when it comes to basketball. Is that racist? I don't know. If it is, then I'm willing to hear the explanation as to why the NBA does have a higher proportion of black players than otherwise. I'm completely open to hearing you out. But he makes a good point. When it comes to the tech industry, they want nation-level parity. Is that the right thing to do? Honestly, I don't know. What I can say, though, is you can't force people to enjoy something. And I do believe that the only reason that these companies are able to do it is because they have such big profit, that their profit margins are huge. And he brings that up. He says there will come a point when they have to lay people off, and what do they choose? To be racist, to discriminate, or to get rid or get rid of their most talented people, and it's going to hurt them in the long run. I'll say this. I firmly believe in equal opportunity. I believe it doesn't matter who you are, what you look like, where you come from, what you believe. You have every right to apply for these jobs, to be equally considered for these jobs. And I think ultimately it's up to I believe the people have a responsibility to weigh you correctly. Like, if we restrict people based on their race, then we are simply restricting our own efficiency. And it doesn't make sense. And that's why equality really is a good thing. It doesn't matter what your gender is. It doesn't matter what your race is. If we want to make the most efficient system possible, we need to let everyone apply and everyone challenge the system. But in this case, we're actually seeing the inverse. We're seeing a call for inefficiency by bringing on people who might not want the job, who might not be qualified for the job simply because they fit a certain trope, and that's wrong. Anyway, I believe Avi will be fired. I don't know when this was posted. Let me see if there's a date on it. It was posted 4 days ago. We'll see if this hits the press. It may be fake, but again, we do have this LinkedIn post, this LinkedIn profile, which looks like, Avi is a real person. He's got a resume posted as of November 23rd, so I don't think this was fabricated. I think it's a real dude. And in which case, let's start counting on our clocks till when he gets fired, and maybe this will get picked up and he won't work at Apple anymore. Or hopefully he won't. So anyway, I've got another video coming up in a few minutes. This time I want to talk about the escalation of violence, the smear campaigns, and some really strange meme phenomena I found where the left can't understand memes. It's really, really weird. It's really weird. The stark contrast. Seriously, stick around. It'll be up in about a minute.